Uncle Ron and stuff. This one is going to be about inside of an Amazon Fire TV. And the reason I'm going inside is that this is one so old it won't take any of the current iOS Android updates. So when I downloaded HBO Max, the new Max app, it will only run on upper level iOS. So this is probably the start of many apps. The apps get updated every day, it seems like. So anyway, in general, when things like this happen, I take the thing apart just to see, one, how you get into it, i.e., how is it assembled and how do you disassemble it, and also to take a look at how they engineered it. I'm just curiosity. And this sort of knowledge, I think, transfers over to other things that I take apart, that taking apart in itself, there's a lot of different ways things are assembled, and so knowing how to open something up without breaking it, which I have done, is a good idea. So here we go. I'm going to now switch over to the Amazon, and I'll point out some key features that are probably applicable to just about any device like this. Let's see if I can do that. No, I have to stop it, so this is part one. Okay, this is the Amazon Fire TV. This is not a stick, this is the Fire TV. And I have it already apart, but you see, here's the back of it, and here. So, disassembly. When I looked at it, you can see that at the top, there's one solid plastic box. So, and it's got a rubbery surface on the bottom, and no screws back here are visible. So I first thought perhaps that underneath this plastic on the edge here, or this padding, that there might be screws buried back in the corners or something, but this rubbery pad didn't want to come up, so I used a flat blade box cutter to go along the edges here and kind of cut down a little bit. And then I started prying up slowly, and sure enough, it popped off, and this particular one you can see has the cover here. It's interesting. It does have, in fact, a beehive logo somewhere on it. I saw it. There's the beehive, which indicates that you can see the honeycomb pattern of the plastic, which is makes it good and firm and solid. And that's a nice piece of design work. And they also have plastic or rubbery bumpers here. This is a nice piece of design work, but you see how it latched in, so it basically snapped down over the bottom. Okay, this is the circuit board that I have removed from here, and it fitted down in like this, and on the board, you probably can't see it very well, but up here is antenna 1 and 2. These little areas right here are the antennas, and I assume this is the Wi-Fi chip. You know, for antenna, it would be logical that it would be in the same location. And of course, over here on the ends, you have the various connections, the USB, the Ethernet port, and the HDMI, and finally the power over at the end here. So if I flip it over, what you'll notice is I have, on this side, I have two big cans, this one and this one. It's interesting, you can see there's some putty sort of stuff on this chip. This is probably the CPU chip. And this is what's called thermal grease or thermal conductive paste. And in here, it's interesting, I thought, this whole piece is a piece of metal, and it's a heat sink. and it's pretty pretty major heat sink. Now, on computers and other things, they'll have a fan that blows down over the CPU chip and has heat sink down here, but it blows air out, pulls in air at one end, blows it across the chip and out again. Now, you don't have any fan in this device, so that's why they went to a pretty extensive length to make a fairly large heat sink. Now, it's not made out of copper, which would be better, but nonetheless, it is huge. And this particular, you see there's a little residue down here where the heat sink, the chip, it fits in like this, goes down in, and these guys line up obviously with holes in the back of the chassis here. You see that? But anyway, what I'm trying to point out, one is it's got a pretty massive heat sink in it, which is well designed, and it also, it's interesting, it adds the stability or weight to the product. Now, down here in the corner, I don't know what that is. Maybe it's one of those stolen RFDI things or something, but it's located down there, or it may have to do with something. It's right underneath of the HDMI port, perhaps it interference protection. I'm not sure what that is exactly. It doesn't appear to be a powered component, but anyway, this is the circuit board for the Amazon Fire TV, and it's pretty well made. It has labels. I don't have a schematic for it, but it's all the components are identified. C's for capacitors, R for resistors. I don't see any individual transistors anywhere, which is interesting. Normally you will find those. I don't see any. Of course, it has DC power input, so there's really no power conversion per se, although it probably does drop it down to 5-volt logic for various things. That's typical logic voltage. But you don't have any big power conversion capacitors, transformers, or any of those sorts of things because of that's taken care of with the power adapter. Okay, this particular metal cover here, I cannot see what's under it. That may be a video portion, but it obviously doesn't get that hot. Or it would have heatsink material on it. In fact, let's see, this sits down here like this. That particular chip sits in this area right here, but it has no heatsink application point. So I guess it doesn't get that particular hot. But I expect this other chip with the grease on it is the CPU chip. Now you can see all these holes in it. They all had screws mounted in it. Little screws, typical for this kind of logic. But anyway, yeah, now repairing it, individual really can't do much. These things, the soldering and unsoldering components, you really have to have special tools. So there's not much you can do with there. All I'm just trying to show is typical, and commenting on this design. It is certainly made well. There was some thought that went into it. It got a nice big heat sink down here. It had nice thermal grease. It's not dried out. The thermal grease, that pinky stuff, is on every hot chip device and everything. Computers have it, and then they have a fan blowing over it and so on. But this is real typical, and this guy must get fairly hot.
I missed something. Can you say it again?
I think part of this has little to do, like this whole section over here really doesn't, you see there's nothing sits down over top of it, this section here. So this is, part of this was just weight you know, stability and oomph. You know, you got to, you know, if a thing weighed 3 ounces when you bought it, you know, there's still some weight means something, you know, in terms of value. You know, if it was too light, it was like, well, there's hardly nothing in there. So they put this big guy in here. That's about it. Again, one of the things that I wanted to point out was that the Wi-Fi antennas, and it's that green sections up there, you can see how small they are, and actually they're fairly large on this particular device compared with the Wi-Fi antennas you'll have in laptops and cell phones and things like that. This is actually a Wi-Fi. I don't know where the Bluetooth stuff, I can't remember if this particular one had Bluetooth, but nonetheless. And now you can see there's a chip with all these solder points. There's a chip underneath of here. Probably that big one right there. It's got all those points on it. All the chips, if you look at them, they'll sometimes tell you who manufactured them. This one says Samsung. This one I don't recognize. Western Electric, I don't know what that is. But they'll tend to tell you where the chips come from. And one of the things that I realized and was informed about, even though I'm sure this guy is assembled in China, that Samsung chip had to be imported by China to go in this device, probably as well as that microprocessors in there. A lot of these other components all had to be imported. Maybe the board was made in China, maybe not, had to be imported. The plastic was probably made in China, but who knows, the metal may have had to be imported. And what I'm getting at is the Chinese do a lot of assembly work, but they don't make every component, so there's export-import. So this particular device, you know, probably South Korea created a Samsung chip someplace, and the Wi-Fi chip someplace else, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this sets back down in here. This goes in. This goes in like this and sets down there. And it's also designed, you see how the edge here, and there's also there's edging here down the corner. So now all these screw points here. And then, as I said, the top, it just fits down over, and I don't know, looking at it, yeah, it can only go one way. You have the big tabs on the side and little tabs at the top, and you can see how it sort of just fits down on here. And then if I were to push hard, it would latch in place. So that's inside a Amazon Fire TV. And really, you know, again, you can't really service the thing, but I saw how it was assembled, and it is one of those plastic latching things again. And I'm overall impressed with the design and implementation of this particular product. A lot of them are not like that, but anyway, just for curiosity. So in general, how to get into something, you run into more and more of this plastic latching stuff. The board itself, not much you can do with it. What am I going to do with this whole thing? I'll probably just keep the board and throw the rest in the trash. Anyway, this is Amazon Fire TV. It's probably first generation, second generation. Anyway, that's enough for today. I will post it when I can.